We got some beautiful gore and carnage and blood and mayhem in this movie. It is, for me, the better film. It is straight to the point. It knows what it is. It knows its goals, and it hits the mark flawlessly. It was such a surprise hit for me in 2023. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to my channel, King Nikki TV. And previously, I did a tier list ranking all 93 new release movies that I watched in 2023. But to cut down, if you did not want to sit through 4 hours of me ranking all the films that I watched last year, I did a separate video on my movies that made my best of year, which I just so happen to have 12 in my best and 12 in my worst. So if you haven't, make sure you check out my my worst. And then now in this video, I will be giving you my 12 best movies of 2023, my personal experience with the movies that I watched last year. Let me know in the comments your best favorite 2023 releases that you watched last year. Now, let's just get right into it. We will be ranking these from my least best to my top best, so that we count down from 12 to 1 to get my number one favorite movie of 2023, what I consider to be the best movie that came out last year. And if you did stay for my live tier list ranking, you already know what my number one movie is. But here we go. I am talking about these movies yet again because, they're great, so why not just keep talking about them. Coming in at number 12 is Dark Harvest, which is a teen horror about this small town that kind of sacrifices its teen boys, where every year on Halloween they have this competition where first they lock the teens up, don't give them any food or water. Then they release them out into the streets as these ravenous creatures to hunt this pumpkin head type figure. And we do the same thing every year, and one boy wins and gets to finally leave the town. Now, this will definitely be in rotation for my yearly Halloween watch. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie, and I can't stand teenage characters, so y'all know I really like this, okay? And we did get that proverbial bully character that I just cannot stand anytime we are dealing with a story that involves teens or kids. But I feel like I was able to swallow it down a lot better here. I still just don't like that, but I liked everything else going on around it. Now, I feel like Dark Harvest does miss the mark in some places, but overall, it is definitely one of the best films from 2023. And I feel like particularly my number one favorite atmosphere in a movie all of 2023, Dark Harvest for me really shines because of the atmosphere that they created. And I feel like also we did not get those typical obnoxious and annoying teen characters. I feel like we got characters that I could really get invested in. Really enjoyed the monster here. The effects were all really good. The kills were great. And I really feel like it was shockingly a lot darker than I thought it would be, since we're dealing with a teen horror. We got a lot of gore and some crazy freaking kill scenes. There's one scene in particular with this crazy river of blood, just what is that thing called? Geyser of blood? I think that's the word. But if you saw the scene, you know. I don't know if I'm describing it right. I think it's a geisha. No, I'm thinking of a geisha girl. Y'all, what is that thing that shoots this crazy water up? That's what I'm trying to describe. This is definitely my favorite teen horror in recent years. I am one of those people. I be feeling like an old maid, because I really be feeling like they don't make teen slashers like they used to. They don't make teen horrors like they used to. We don't have any Sarah Michelle Gellar's. We don't have any Neve Campbell's or Skeet Ulrich or Josh Hartnett. I just be feeling like we just don't make the teen stars and the teen horrors like we used to. But I feel like there were some real stars in this movie. and some really good characters. Now, we could have done better on the characters, particularly our lead. We have where our lead, his big brother, won this competition a previous year, and now he's like hell bent on proving himself to his parents, to his town, himself. I don't know. Honestly, it doesn't make a lot of sense why he is so gung-ho to kind of live up or surpass his brother's legacy. And also, he does come off as kind of a rebel without a cause type of character, where it's kind of like, what are you so mad for? Like, why do you have such a chip on your shoulder? But the actor pulls it off enough to where it doesn't come off quite as glaringly obnoxious as this character could come off. I do feel like the lead was effectively charismatic. He carried everything well. I really love the like kind of 60s vibe that we go with. I feel like this is one of those movies where the time period is a bit ambiguous. Like, we play with the aesthetics of the 60s. However, you kind of don't know the time period, but honestly, that doesn't bother me. It could be a current present day town that just has these aesthetics, or it could be a town back in the 60s. There are some racial things with this Mexican kid and this black girl, so it feels like the 60s era, but that whole maybe not exactly knowing the time period doesn't really bother me, because for me, I just feel like it's the 60s. But I get how it may come off a bit ambiguous. Now, I do also feel like when we speak of the atmosphere and everything that the filmmakers were able to create with this town, I feel like the tone, it is effectively haunting. The lure of this town and this creature would work really well in spawning a sequel, in my humble opinion, a franchise really. The ending of this film, though, didn't leave me as satisfied as I would have liked. But overall, this shined in a year that for me was kind of less than stellar on horror movies, in my humble opinion. And as someone a little morbid, who likes for stories to get really dark and kind of depressive, the fate of all these kids in this town and the fates we see is actually extremely sad. Now, the story does have some unanswered questions. The fate of one of the lead's friends was confusing for me, how it is laid out. Kind of hard to explain without spoilers, but it's pretty much a situation where he kind of knows his fate before it happens, but it's kind of unclear on how he does. So that was a bit odd, and even how his fate is laid out and plays out, it's kind of like, wait, why is this happening like this? I feel like there's obviously some type of supernatural undertone with this whole lore, with this town, with the whole scarecrow being able to come to life and everything. But this situation with the lead's friend knowing his fate is kind of like, well, wait, why is that got a supernatural undertone? I don't know. It was a bit unclear and confusing for me. Like I said, with the lead, I just kind of didn't buy it or understand it. His whole character motivation, I feel like we should have given him a different motivation as opposed to wanting to kind of prove himself, because it kind of feels a little shallow, in my humble opinion. And another hit to the movie is it was pretty predictable. There were various twists, and I called them all extremely early. I called the ending. Also, with the story, the lead's parents are unsuccessful in keeping him locked up, even though year after year in this town, they successfully locked their sons up. So that whole angle made no sense, and it felt a bit contrived to be able to just have the lead run out on this night. But despite its flaws, I just genuinely had a lot of fun with this one. And honestly, like I said, my number one favorite atmosphere of the entire year. And I went into this one completely blind, knew nothing about it, really didn't know what I was walking into. And from the synopsis, anytime it's gonna deal with teenagers, I just already kind of get in a certain mind. I was just like, okay. But it actually really sucks me in right off the bat from the very opening sequence. And I feel like we could have, upped our game with the writing and how we move throughout the story. However, I do feel like they really brought something unique, and they brought something that can really spawn its own franchise that can be a really successful, effective franchise. Now, moving on to our next film, The Last Voyage of the Demeter, we have a story where we pretty much get a perfect storm mixed with Dracula. We have this period piece where this crew is setting sail, but they do not know that their cargo is actually Dracula. Now, I have to be honest with this one. Although I do still feel it is 100% deserving of being on my best of the year list, I have rewatched this a few times in the last week, and I do feel like it is honestly losing its luster a bit the more I rewatch it. It doesn't feel like it has that rewatchable value that I personally like my movies to have. I don't know if other people are like this, but I'm one of those people who, if I enjoy something, I want to rewatch it over and over and over again. Like some of my favorite movies, I literally watch so many times throughout the year, and that kind of drags this down for me. When I did my tier list ranking all the movies I watched in 2023, at the very end, I ranked my best of tier to put all of them in order. And at that time, I ranked The Last Voyage of the Demeter a lot higher than I'm ranking it now. And that is because I feel like it is definitely losing a lot of the luster as I rewatch it, which I don't like. I left the theater after watching this completely raving about this movie. I did a standalone review for this. And even though I do still feel it is one of the best of 2023, the entertaining factor is really going down. But I love the setup and the atmosphere of this movie. We got some fun effects and gore and kills. And of course, visually, it would be better without the CGI Dracula. And that, okay, CGI or bad CGI does not, I always say that does not hinder my enjoyment of a movie. Of course, everyone wants good effects, and when you're talking about horror, you want practical effects. But I always say that does not ruin my enjoyment. But honestly, the more I see that CGI Dracula face, the more it irks me and kind of does ruin my enjoyment of the movie. It is a slow burn story that I always felt like just builds really well, but I gotta be honest, the more I rewatch it, it does come off as a little lackluster and mundane. But we got a great opening scene, we got enjoyable characters, our lead is beyond capable and talented and likable, even though I do feel like they try too hard to make him a good or sanctimonious, honestly, character. Is it just me, or are we harming kids a lot more in horror movies these days? Like, I feel like harming kids in horror used to be very few and far between and scarce. Like, maybe you would terrorize kids or scare kids, but actually harming or killing kids was not something that happened a lot. But I'm feeling like, I don't know if it was just because we got Evil Dead Rise and Dark Harvest and The Last Voyage and a few others, but I feel like we is killing kids all willy-nilly these days in horror movies, and it's starting to bother me. And I was never that person. I'm like, child, kill the damn kids in the movies. But it is really starting to like bother me, like, but I just had to say that. I did feel really immersed in the setting and in this atmosphere when I first went to the movies, but it isn't pulling me in as much as when I rewatch it. I really hate, and from the first time I saw this, I just hate how this movie ends. And I understand they want to set up a sequel, but I kind of hate when movies put something in at the very tail end of the movie to set up a sequel that just kind of doesn't fit. Like, set up a sequel in a way that makes sense in the movie. But I feel like with this and another movie that's soon going to be in this video, they put something at the end to set up a sequel that just feels awkward, unnecessary, and just isn't good. Like, it's just not a good sequence. I'm so sorry, but it's just not. But overall, I still really enjoy this. It gives me 30 Days of Night. It gives me a Perfect Storm mashup. And it feels like a Dracula slasher. And I am very much here for that. Coming in at number 10, we have the Netflix movie Nowhere. We have this futuristic time where there's a resource shortage in Spain. So the country starts killing off the elderly. Then they kill off all the kids. Then they kill off all the pregnant women. And we have this married couple who is trying to smuggle themselves out of the country because the wife is pregnant, and they get smuggled on these shipping containers. They are separated, and she ends up alone in the middle of the ocean on a shipping container. This movie was so goddamn intense and emotionally taxing. I do not think I will ever rewatch this. This movie is so goddamn good, but it's so emotionally taxing, and I personally just cannot go through watches like that a lot. But this was truly a phenomenal movie in my humble opinion. The more time passes and the more I sit with this movie, the better it is in my humble opinion. I feel like this is literally one of the best like survival type thrillers that I have seen in a while. Our lead didn't do like a ton of stupid stuff where she's making a bunch of dumb decisions. It is realistic that you won't make the best decisions at every turn in a situation like this. But overall, she was very capable. She was likable. It was easy to root for her. The movie, to be in one setting for me, never got mundane or repetitive. I was invested the entire time. As someone with the fear of the ocean, a lot of those shots and just being stuck in the ocean hit hard for me. Even if some parts are slightly unrealistic and over the top, it keeps you sufficiently stressed out and on the edge. This movie manages to be thrilling. It manages to be heartbreaking. It manages to take such a sensitive topic with kids being murdered, elderly being murdered, and it doesn't feel exploitive. Like, it actually feels really gripping and appropriately heartbreaking. The movie was freaking gut-wrenching, and yes, with the setup, a story, a plot like this, I expect a certain amount of suspending, belief, and that doesn't bother me. But honestly, the way they executed everything, it was so amazingly done. And when it comes to like certain things where you have to suspend belief, I feel like some of it was played out in a way where there's a certain vagueness of if certain things actually were real or if our lead was just hallucinating. And I love a one setting movie. I love a fight for survival thriller. And this for me was the cream of the crop when we talk about the movies we've got in that subgenre recently. Next, we have The Blackening, which is a kind of parody comedy horror on black characters in horror slashers. And this was a surprise great time for me because I am not a fan of comedy. I never have been. There are comedies I enjoy, but it is at the bottom of my genres that I like. I hardly ever, if ever, just go to turn on a comedy. But this was really so good. I saw this in theaters. So unapologetically black. Everything was so on point and relatable. I literally got every single solitary reference. Perfect runtime. It is a movie that has the standard horror slasher elements. It feels more satire. It feels more comedy and less horror. And I thought the social commentary was executed so well, particularly the ending sequence. And it's handled in a way that doesn't feel heavy-handed, but it makes its point very well. Great ensemble cast. I feel like this is my number one favorite ensemble cast of the entire year. I enjoyed every single character, every single actor, every single performance. Everyone nailed it. I wish we got more horror. And that is I absolutely hate horror comedies. Like, I hate that genre. I do not like comedy with my horror, and this movie makes the misstep that a lot of comedy horrors make that makes me not like them, which is we insert way more comedy than actual horror elements. I absolutely hate that. And I wish it wasn't so cliched. I wish we didn't play so much into slasher tropes and instead did something different. I wish it wasn't so predictable. The killer, the motive, all of that was so glaringly predictable. I called it, I swear to God, in like 10 minutes. Like, it was crazy. But overall, I felt like this was so mother freaking good, and we need more of these. I would take a sequel to The Blackening, honestly. Maybe following a different crew, a different friend group, but I would take a sequel to The Blackening. I'm here for that. Get on that. Next, we have Mother's Day. We have a retired secret agent. She has enemies who come back to kidnap her son. They can't find her, so they go after the son she gave up for adoption like 16 years earlier. And just like Liam Neeson, she has to use her special set of skills in order to save her son and take down her enemies. Now, this is one of those movies. It is an action movie. The writing is a bit lacking, but the action is so good. And honestly, it's a fun story just to, follow, but the action is so good. I absolutely love the pacing. It is just kicking ass from top to bottom and never really lets up. I love an action star who gets hurt, who gets shot, who gets beaten, and we have that here. But our lead is tough as hell. Love her so much. This is one of those movies that is just a fun ride the entire time. I really like the villains that we get here. I feel like the style here is very quirky, which I am typically not a fan of, but I thought it was very well done here. And I do feel like Mother's Day feels like more style over substance, but it is just such a good time. The flaws are easily overlooked for me personally. The acting, the characters are all really over the top. No one is very subtle, but I think that works here, and it works where kind of all the villains around our lead are over the top. She's the only kind of subtle one, and that really works here. And it more than differentiates her from all the other cast, as opposed to just, well, they're villains and she's the main protagonist. But I feel like that's another way that kind of sets her apart from them in how the performances are played. If you are a fan of B action movie shenanigans, this is a must watch. Another ending I didn't like because they are just trying to set up a sequel and throw in an unnecessary ending. Next, we have Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. And one of my all-time favorite franchises ever. Love Ethan Hunt. I gotta be honest, I was never big on Tom Cruise. I never understood the Tom Cruise hype until Mission Impossible. Because Mission Impossible is my ish. Ethan Hunt, iconic. And I feel like I saw this in theaters, loved it so much, did not see any previews. Y'all know I go into my stuff blind. So all the stunts and all those big action sequences, I got to experience them for the first time watching the movie, and everything really freaking worked. The desert shootout, the airport scene was intense. The train, the fight in the streets, there was this tight like alleyway fight. And for me, though, the movie is way too goddamn long, but the thief character, she annoyed me to no end. I could not stand that girl, and I honestly feel like she was on the verge of ruining the movie for me. Like, I was sitting in that theater feeling like I cannot enjoy this because she's such a prominent figure in the movie and she was getting on my damn nerves. I really could not stand her. The only part I really enjoyed with her was they had this like car chase scene with the thief in his yellow car, and it was kind of funny, and she just kept circling. That was really effective. Tom Cruise always delivers. The Mission Impossible team that make these movies always delivers. Love the AI angle. Ethan Hunt has faced every foe imaginable, so it is only right, especially in the year 2023 and this time we are in, that he faces up against AI. Some of the story didn't make sense for me. I love the villain, but I also, as much as I hate an infallible action hero, I hate an infallible villain even more, kinda. I hate those villains that every plan goes off without a hitch. I get it, he has AI on his side, but that still just kind of bugs me and feels unrealistic for me. That's what we got here. I wasn't the biggest fan of every beat the story took. Almost 3 freaking hours long in runtime for me felt unnecessary. Some of this stuff could have been chopped out in my humble opinion. But this is a franchise that just does not miss, and Dead Reckoning is no exception. We really got some of the best chef's kiss action movies of all time in 2023. Next, we have Plane. And yes, I am putting Plane above Dead Reckoning because of the rewatch value. I do not see myself rewatching a 3-hour long Dead Reckoning as often as rewatching Plane. And I have already rewatched Plane like 4 or 5 times this year. And A Plane is the movie with Mike Colter and Gerard Butler where a commercial plane goes down and we have to fight to survive to get our way out because we have these like mercenaries or whatever where we crash at. Surprisingly intense goddamn movie. They squeeze all the intensity out of this generic ass setup. It feels like one of those late 80s, 90s action thrillers. One of those movies when I can't talk. Where we would have seen Arnold Schwarzenegger like playing a pilot back in like 1995. I feel like Plane also uses its grade A talent to elevate the story. Gerard Butler for me gives one of the best performances I have ever seen him in. He steals the show, great character, and y'all know I ain't really a fan of Gerard Butler. Mike Colter shines as always. When doesn't he? The director for me is so good here, and I like how we focus on the characters and their emotions, making it easy for the audience to feel everything along with them, all the passengers that are stuck here. I'm personally not a fan, have never been a fan of like shaky cam and handheld camera work when we're dealing with action and fight scenes, but I personally feel like it works so well here. And I'm so shocked that I even feel that way because I have such disdain for handheld camera work when I'm watching action scenes because I feel like it makes it hard for me to really see what's going on. But it helps here where it feels frantic and you feel kind of this unease of the scene and the tension of the scene. But I hate hard to see action sequences. Tony Goldwyn was a standout. Really enjoy his character. Just love the 90s edge of your seat action thriller feel. I went into Plane expecting to enjoy it, but I expected it to be more of like a B action movie. But this is grade A action movie in my humble opinion. Truly dangerous and terrifying bad guys. Felt like a gritty ruthlessness to these bad guys. Perfectly paced adrenaline never stops pumping. Yes, I put Plane above Dead Reckoning. Yes, 150 million%. I stand 10 toes down about that decision. I feel like Plane gets straight to the point. It is for me the better film. It is straight to the point. It knows what it is. It knows its goals and it hits the mark flawlessly. It was such a surprise hit for me in 2023. No One Will Save You. We have an alien invasion movie that is done with a very unique spin. There is no dialogue in the movie. I think we have like 2 lines of dialogue the entire movie, 2 or 3, something like that towards the end. This is the epitome of a movie that just completely subverts my expectations. This was another surprise hit for me. I didn't have high expectations. I really had no expectations. I just watched it, but I was blown away by how much I enjoyed this movie. I did a standalone video on this if you want to know my in-depth spoiler thoughts, but I love the decision to make the story have like no dialogue because I feel like that was so unique and it really worked. And the way it was executed, I didn't know it was no dialogue before watching the movie, and I honestly didn't even realize, like, I didn't sit there watching the movie like, there's no dialogue. I really honestly didn't notice it until we got pretty far into the movie, and I'm like, wait, no one has been, there's a certain point where our lead comes into contact with people and no one's talking. That was the biggest moment where I was like, why ain't nobody saying nothing? I literally just did not even notice it. Like, that's how well they executed this. I was so involved with everything else going on that I wasn't sitting there just thinking there's no dialogue. It worked so well. And I also love the decisions for where the story goes. I loved how the aliens looked. I loved their whole design. I loved how they sounded, how they moved. The movie was quiet but captivating. That's how I like to describe No One Will Save You. They gave us such an intriguing mystery and some really cool scenes. And I feel like the way they set up the whole mystery surrounding the lead worked so well. sometimes when movies try to lay out a certain mystery like this and they want to put little tidbits, sometimes for me it come off as frustrating. But I feel like this movie, it came off where I was just like glued and clued into like, okay, well, what is it? Like, what's going on with her? What did she do? What happened? It was so well done. The lead was freaking brilliant. First of all, I just have so much respect for the acting craft, but to have to carry a movie in particular with no dialogue, this lead did so freaking well. We only have her to feed off of for a lot of the movie, with her just not saying a word. That can easily be such a boring performance and such a boring thing to watch, but it was so captivating. It was so good, so well done. I was so engaged. The facial expressions, the body language, all the physical acting the actress had to do with not being able to say anything, hats off to her. Next, we have Extraction 2. And this is the sequel from the first Extraction. This is our action movie. This is the first time I like Chris Hemsworth. He is truly perfect here. So many iconic action sequences in one film. This Extraction franchise, because y'all know more are coming, are the movies that made me like Chris Hemsworth. They are kind of like how Mission Impossible made me like Tom Cruise. That's what we have here. And as much as I loved the first Extraction, and I do still think it is the better film, I feel like the first Extraction is the better film because I can get down a lot more with that story. The story in Extraction 2, throw that whole thing away. But the action in Extraction 2, that might be better than the first one. They upped their game. So many iconic sequences in just one freaking film. We got just truly breathtaking moments. The prison break sequence, the prison yard sequence, badass hand-to-hand fight, shootouts, train sequence, factory scene, freaking train versus helicopter scene, the gym fight sequence, the high-rise sequence, Chris Hemsworth fighting with his flaming arm. That was so freaking cool. The team that fights with Chris Hemsworth's character are standouts as well. I love those two, especially the girl. She had a badass fight where she's fighting like two bad guys at one time. The biggest letdown for me, like I said, is the story. I do not think we needed the ex-wife. I do not think we needed the personal angle. It could have just been another extraction mission like the first film. And particularly because I feel like that personal angle and the wife just does not work here. It brings the film down astronomically for me. When I rewatch this, I find myself fast forwarding from a lot of those moments. I felt like Chris Hemsworth and the woman playing his wife had absolutely no chemistry. It just felt very unnecessary. The ending was also a bit let down for me. I definitely expected more from our final showdown, our big third act showdown. But my biggest gripe of this movie was the teenage son. He got on my goddamn nerves, and he is the epitome of why I cannot stand teen and child characters in these movies. He is the poster child for my disdain for how we write teenage characters. It was, oh my God, I was like, child, throw that little boy off the plane. Like, I could not stand that kid. I like my child characters to be like the daughter was in this movie, where she's a part of what's happening, but she in the background. I liked her a lot more than her dumbass brother that was getting on my nerves. Next, we have John Wick Chapter 4. All of our returning characters shine. We already know this is the fourth in the franchise. John Wick is kicking ass and doing something, child. I absolutely love this one. And I feel like the John Wick movies do so well at creating characters. And I gotta say, though, the one who steals the show for me was Bill Skarsgård as the Marquis. He even steals the show from Keanu Reeves, which wasn't really hard this time because I don't know what happened, but Keanu Reeves didn't really have no lines much. Like, everybody else kind of talked more than him. But Bill Skarsgård as the Marquis stole the show for me. I absolutely loved him. First of all, I just love a good villain. I love a stylish villain. Okay, visually, this movie is stunning. All the backdrops for the fights. I found myself so engaged and enthralled with just the set pieces and everything happening in the background. Everything looked so good. We got everything I could possibly want here as far as action, sword fights. I love a sword fight. Knives, guns. The sequence in the house with the exploding like fire bullets. I can't think what they were called. Freaking mind blowing. The way that was shot. Chef's kiss. The shootout and like the traffic circle thing. I will say though, the thing that brings John Wick down for me with chapter 4 is the story. Yeah, but you know what? When we talk about action movies, sometimes the story be taking a hit. Like, okay, but I feel like I typically am fine with the story in the John Wick movies. This is honestly the first in the franchise where I'm just really not on board with the story. It felt way too convoluted for me. I felt like, okay, we're going to the desert to do something. Then we got to go to the family. Then we got to do a task for them. Then we got to go over here and do this. Then we got to go over there. I was just like, baby, we all over the place. So I just really did not enjoy that. But John Wick as a whole, the franchise is obviously going down in history as one of the greatest action movies, action franchises of all time for a reason. Okay, very well deserved. I did a standalone video for this and I said, baby, give everybody working on this project, pay them they do, because baby, this was amazing. I mean, jaw-dropping, amazing. Evil Dead Rise. And I am thoroughly surprised it is not my number one. I have rewatched this movie, I swear to God, like 7 to 10 times in 2023. I rewatched this movie so much. Great opening scene. I kind of want a full movie of just that like the people at that cabin. Like, what happened over there? Because the Deadite lives. Though that opening sequence was just so good, and the Evil Dead title with the Deadite levitating over the lake will go down in freaking history for me. The visual with the music and everything. We got some beautiful gore and carnage and blood and mayhem in this movie. Swallowing glass, the cheese grater, the elevator puppet-like scene. I loved the idea, the change of being in the city instead of a cabin. However, I do wish we did more with that. On one hand, I can appreciate how we were still able to be secluded even in the middle of a metropolitan, in the middle of a city. But at the same time, I expected us to kind of utilize being in a city and not a remote cabin a lot more. So it's a plus and negative for me. And I will also say this movie has my number one favorite Deadite ever of all time with the mom Deadite. That actress was so brilliant. And this is what I was talking about in No One Lives. There's also some mother freaking amazing physical acting here from the woman playing the mom Deadite. Just some of the best I've ever seen. It's crazy how I absolutely hated her in Vikings. And now she is my favorite person walking planet Earth. The story did feel a bit mediocre, but very creative gore and horror elements here. I loved all the references and callbacks to previous Evil Dead movies that we have here. Man, if I'm ranking Evil Dead movies, baby, this one to be kind of high. Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you. My number one of all the movies I saw, all 93 new release movies I saw in 2023, the one that is the cream of the crop that rises to the top is Sisu. Movie blew me away. Sisu gives us this lone guy who has to fight against Nazis that are trying to take his gold. Extremely basic story. I'm gonna be honest with you. Our protagonist has a ridiculous amount of plot armor, but Sisu was the most fun I had with the movie last year. It felt very Tarantino, Rambo, Western style vibes. Nothing more to this. You get exactly what the plot promises to deliver, and it goes exactly where you expect the story to go. Gore for the sake of gore. Brutal, ridiculous, but I love gore for the sake of gore. That's a compliment to the movie, okay? I also feel like we have a scene where our lead is breathing through a man's neck underwater, and that has to be the coolest thing I have ever seen in my life. Like, I feel like a 10-year-old when I watch this movie. Like, that 10-year-old me that was obsessed with gore, that's how I feel watching this. Great pacing, good runtime. Our main character is, look, the story, the character, the way it's written, it is kind of lacking. We have no real reason to root for him other than we obviously ain't rooting for Nazis. But I really enjoyed the style of this movie. I had so much fun with this. It is one of those movies that honestly, yes, we are lacking in the story, but everything else more than makes up for it. I have no problem with a style over substance type of movie. This movie gets ridiculous. You have to, child, forget suspending belief. Just, you, like, this movie goes so crazy. But it is such a fun ride. When I first watched this movie, I literally watched it, it ended, and I went back and rewatched it immediately. And I hardly ever do that. No matter how much I like a movie, I hardly ever on a first watch just immediately go back and rewatch it. And that is what I did with Sisu. I need more movies to come out like this. Like, this is so my vibe. This movie is so me. This is just such a good time. Absolutely loved all the fighting, all the action, all the blood and guts and gore for the sake of motherfucking gore. If I was to ever work in the film industry, I want to be the person doing all the practical effects. Because I feel like they be having the time of their life. I want to blow some shit up too. But we got such a well put together movie that, and I love a movie like this where, yes, it's pretty basic and simple in the plot, but I love a movie that knows exactly what it is and delivers exactly what it promises to deliver. We don't need always something to be 3-4 hours and be really intricate and, you know, make you think. And like, yes, that stuff is great, but the array of movies that we get, I feel like sometimes they kind of try too hard. And I love a movie that just doesn't try too hard. Like, it is just something that feels like the people had a lot of fun making it, and so you have a lot of fun watching it. But let me know in the comments, what was your favorite experiences with movies of 2023? If you haven't, make sure you check out my worst movies of 2023. And if you want to enjoy 4 hours of me talking about movies, check out my tier list ranking all 93 movies that I watched in 2023. Thank you.